or drasha about the parsha because we're not able to say it in shul on Shabbos. We're still limited with the attendance in shul and how many people come and with masks. So we'll give it Thursday evenings, b'li neder, until further notice. I just want to remind everybody that Mitzvah Hashem, we have a shir pretty much every evening, Sunday evenings in Navi. The rest of the week we're learning halacha on Thursday evening on the parsha, 8 o'clock. You're welcome to join us. I just want to begin with one thought. We know that Chazal tell us that before Shavuos, this is the first Shabbos after Shavuos, before Shavuos we read the Teichacha, the curses. And Chazal tell us, why do we read it before Shavuos? Well, Shavuos is a new beginning. And Tichra Shana V'Kil, let all the curses end before the new year. Because after all, Shavuos is a new year for certain aspects, for Paris Ilan, for fruits. And Tachel Shana B'Chaiseha, and after Shavuos, let all the blessings begin. After Shavuos, it's a new beginning. So I just want to begin with a thought from the Eretz Tzvi. It's a sefer written by the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva Chachmei Lublin, the same yeshiva that Rav Meir Shapiro was known for. Rav Aryeh Tzvi Frumer, Hashem Yinkaim Adamav, Hashem should avenge his death. He was killed by the Nazis, Yimach Shvam. Anyway, he says, you know why we read parshas Naso, this week's parsha? Because this week's parsha talks about blessings, about brachos. This week's parsha talks about the birchas kohanim, where Hashem commands the kohanim to give over the bracha of Hashem to Klal Yisrael. So it's a week of blessings, of brachos. And it's a beginning, a new beginning, and therefore the first Shabbos after Shavuos we read about good things. We end the year of curses before Shavuos, and now we begin only with blessings. So I want to begin my shir this evening with good news. You know, there's so much difficulty around us where we're just still trying to get over the pandemic, the coronavirus, and all its ramifications. You know, this morning I was in shul and I turned around and the shul was not as full as it usually is, and everybody's wearing masks and we're far away from each other, and it's somewhat depressing. Last night I went to shul. I was afraid, you know, they have a curfew. I was afraid the policeman was going to stop me on my way to shul when I went for Mariv at 9 o'clock. So a lot of difficult situations, challenges that HaKadosh Baruch Hu placed in front of us. The coronavirus, and then the last week about all the looting and not only the protesting, the peaceful protesting is fine, but the damages that some of the looters did to stores and to businesses is a terrible thing. So I want to begin with some good news. Baruch Hashem, I spoke to Rabbi Moti Katz today. He's home. Rabbi Katz, who is not only a good friend of myself, but he's a good friend of the yeshiva. He helps us out in the shul, in the yeshiva. He's constantly a man without a title. So I spoke to him, the first time I spoke to him in 2 or 3 months, since he wasn't feeling well. He was sick. He just came home. He told me he's trying to recuperate. He's with a walker. And Baruch Hashem, trying to get better, get back to himself. So it's the first step in a good manner. It's the first step towards a full recovery. And the first thing he told me, after 2 minutes of saying, how are you feeling, Rabbi Katz? Welcome, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Rafi. He said, what could I do? Tell me what the yeshiva needs help with. I'm here to help the yeshiva. The first thing. I was amazed. You know, he just came home from the hospital. He was in the hospital and a rehab center. And now he's home. And the first thing that's on his mind is what he could do to help the yeshiva. And therefore, I think it's very, very appropriate that we start the new year of Shavuos with only good news. Tachel Shana Berchaiseha, Mirz Hashem, we hope that this will be the first news of good news, and we should have constantly good news from here on. Amen v'amen. I want to tell you a vart, a beautiful vart from the Beirach Moshe on this week's parsha. He says as follows: Naso, the Torah begins this week's parsha. Velvo, is there any way I'm getting distracted by some of the images? Anyway, how do I just, maybe I could just see myself, I'm not sure. Let's see, I don't know how to do that. Okay, anyway, if it says, Naso es rosh b'nei Gershon gamheim v'veisav v'yisam v'mishpachosam. You should also, the Torah says, you should count the family of Gershon, them too, to the house of their parents, the mishpachosam, to their families. So the Beirach Moshe asks two questions. He says, question number one is, Gam Haim, them too. They also should be counted. Why does it say Gam Haim? We know at the end of Parshas Bamidbar, it talks about Shevet Kahas, about the family of Kahas. And now we're talking about the family of Gershon. What? They also? And secondly, maybe a more important question he asks, is normally we say, L'mishpachosam, l'veisavosam. We first say their families to the house of their fathers. And here the Torah switches the order. The house of their fathers, and then to their families. Why over here is it switched? So he has a beautiful thought, and I think it's very appropriate for our times. And maybe as we see the challenges that everybody has to overcome during this period of time, the one thing that always comes to my mind is Amunah, is belief in Hashem. With all the difficulties, with all Nebuch, how many people died because of the virus and how the virus is unfortunately not over. And I spoke to my son in Eretz Yisrael. He told me, you still can't come to Eretz Yisrael. If you come, they're going to put you 2 weeks in quarantine. He was hoping in Yeshiva Smir, they'll bring some of the Bachrim. No, they don't allow Bachrim there. So it's not over. So the one thing that we rely upon is Amunah, is belief. You know, the Nebuch, there was one person in Bensonhurst. There was several people from Bensonhurst that were killed over the last month or two. One was Rabbi Cohen, a young man, 55 years old. And I happened to mention this week, it's a terrible tragedy, left over many children, Rabbi Cohen. So somebody told me, when I told over that, just mentioned it to somebody in shul this week, he told me, I'll tell you, I think one of his parents said at the Levaya, at the funeral, that he thanks, he or she, I'm not sure it's the mother or the father of this Rabbi Cohen. His parents, one of his parents is definitely still here in this world, maybe both of them, I'm not sure. He said, no, just the opposite. He had a certain heart defect when he was born. And the doctors were worried about how long he could survive. You know, the coronavirus took away the people who had any difficulties, any physical difficulties. So the parents said, I thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu that my child lived 55 years. This is the true Amunah. How many stories we read over the last month or two of people that Nebuch were taken from us, and the survivors, family members, spouses, wives, husbands, parents, children, who they had such Amunah and such belief that it's shining to everybody else. It's an example to everybody else. So the Beirach Moshe tells us that you know why it mentions here Gam, they also, and it says Beis Abayisam Mishpachosam. He says it's a lesson in Amunah. It's a lesson in belief in Hashem. And he quotes the Yavitz. He wrote a sefer called Or HaChaim, not to be mixed up with this two Sfarim, Or HaChaim on Chumash. He says as follows. He says, you know why when there was the Spanish Inquisition, there were two types of Jews. There were some Jews who believed in God, who believed in Hashem, because they looked in the world and they saw there's a world and they said, oh, there must be a God. And there are other people, and those people, when it came time for whether to keep their faith or not keep their faith, unfortunately, they gave up their faith. They gave up their emunah. But the people that had it imbued within them, their emunah was part and parcel of them. They learned it from their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, and it was part of their bones. Those people, they never gave it up, and they, despite all the difficulties and all the various galios and all the pogroms and all the Holocausts, they were the individuals that said, no, we're still maminim, we're still believers. He says that's why every day a Jew says twice a day, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Shema means hear. Hear, O Israel, Hashem is our Elokeinu, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one. Why doesn't it say, instead of Shema, it should say Re'eh, look. So he quotes, the Berach Moshe quotes the Yavitz and says, you know why? Because Shema means to hear. We don't have to see it. We have to hear it. Shema means that we understand it from our parents. It's within us. Emunah, belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, has to be part and parcel. It has to be something that we teach our children and our grandchildren, and the best way of teaching them is if they see within us that no matter how difficult times might be, and no, don't let anyone fool you. We are living in very difficult times. Very, very difficult times. Some people lost their jobs. Some people nebuch were sick. Some people lost relatives. Afal Pikain, despite all these challenges, we have emunah. We don't complain. We take all these challenges. We say, Hashem, we trust in you. And therefore, he says, the people who had emunah, they were the ones who believed. They're the ones who kept their faith despite everything. He says from there, the Berach Moshe quotes the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer says that we just read a few days ago, last Friday and Shabbos, on the Yontif of Shavuos, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us that before Kabbalas HaTorah, before we go to Har Sinai, it says you have to be careful not to touch Har Sinai, not to touch Mount Sinai, V'gbalta Sa'am, Saviv Leimar. And then it says another time, Penyerso Hashem Lirois, make sure they don't touch Har Sinai. Why is it mentioned twice? So Chassam Sofer says that a person has to, Higbalta, there has to be a separation, there has to be a boundary within us, both in Gashmias, in the physical world, and also in Ruchnias, that it's a Hagbala Ruchnis, the Chassam Sofer says. What does that mean? That we don't need to see it, we don't need proof that there's a God in this world. We know that it's part of us. We saw it in our parents. We saw it in our grandparents. And this is what we have to imbue within future generations. I mention this from time to time. What's missing in Chinuch today, our Rabbeim are doing a great job, especially now, where it's so hard to teach with a computer, with a phone, but we have to talk about Amunah. We have to talk about belief. We can't take it for granted. Amunah means that a son sees his father and his mother, despite the fact that Chas v'Shalom, he lost his job, or despite the fact that he lost a relative, he says, Baruch Hashem gamzu l'toiva, Baruch atah Hashem dayan ha'emes. He thanks HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore, the first thing he says, the Berach Moshe, is we have to understand that there's not only Hagbala Gashmis, we have to separate from Har Sinai a physical, but it has to be ruchnius. It has to be part and parcel. That a person sees a Jew, he realizes that he's a maimin, he's a believer. I want to tell you a very famous story of the Chafetz Chaim. Chafetz Chaim once went to a doctor, and the doctor was a Jewish doctor, and the doctor wasn't so religious. He wasn't such a maimin. And the doctor asked the Chafetz Chaim, he said, give me proof that there's a God in this world. Show me, prove it to me that there's a God. So the Chafetz Chaim answered him the following. He said, tell me, you're a doctor, right? Show me that you're a doctor. How do I know that you're a doctor? How do you know that you have credentials to treat me? So the doctor pointed to his wall and he said, look, I have a certificate I went to a university, and therefore I have a certificate that I'm a doctor. So the Chafetz Chaim wasn't happy. He said, 1 minute, that certificate is 30 years old. Maybe 30 years ago you were a good doctor. How do I know that you're a good doctor today? So the doctor said, well, we take many tests, and we have to practice medicine. We have to, not only before we become a full-fledged doctor, we have to go through in a hospital, in an emergency room, we have to treat patients, and only then we become certified doctor. And once we get certified, we're certified for the rest of our lives. We don't need a new certification. So the Chafetz Chaim said, you're answering my question. HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed us miracles. When did HaKadosh Baruch Hu show us these miracles? Thousands of years ago. In the times of Yetzias Mitzrayim, in the times of the Nevi'im, HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Nisim and Neflois, miracles. Does Hashem have to show it all the time? No, those miracles, it's like your certificate on the wall. Just like your certificate is good for not only for that time, it's good for years and years later. So too, the miracles that HaKadosh Baruch Hu performed has to be imbued within us, from father to son, from grandfather to grandson, for all the generations. And therefore, because of this, we're maminim. We don't need proof today. And as I mentioned previously, when we look outside, a person looks, and people walking with masks, they think they're crazy. What are people walking with masks? I don't see anything happening. There's a little germ that we can't see with our eyes, we can't feel with our fingers, and yet this germ could kill people. We understand that, right? Whoever knows about the virus and who wears masks and gloves and is so careful, we know that this virus, despite that we can't see it, we can't feel it, we understand there's a virus. And so too, the Havdal Elef Harofim, the language that we use every day of our lives, twice a day, is Shema Yisrael. Not Re'eh, you don't have to see it. In order to you to understand Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, we have to hear it. It has to be heard from our parents and grandparents and our Abbayim and our neighbors and our friends. We have to see, not just see with our physical eyes, we have to see with our minds. We have to hear it and be part and parcel of us. And therefore the language that's used is not just to see, but it's rather to hear. Shema Yisrael. So he says, so too I understand this week's parsha. Berach Moshe tells us, so too I understand the parsha. The parsha begins, Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe, Naso es, what does the Torah tell us? Naso es Rosh, Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe, Rema Naso es Rosh b'nei Gershon, Gam heim, Levei Savoisam wa Mishpachosam. Them too. What do you mean them too? If you look at the previous parsha, the Kahas, the last pasuk in last week's parsha talks about Kahas. You know what the job of Kahas was? The job of Kahas was to carry the Mishkan. They had the job of carrying the various articles of the Mishkan in the Midbar, in the wilderness. But the Torah tells us, the last pasuk, V'lo yavo'u liros kivalas hakodesh, they should not see kivalas hakodesh v'meisuf. They don't want to cause themselves harm, to be killed, God forbid. They should not see, to look at the holy, at the kodesh, kivalas hakodesh. What does it mean, kivala? It's a very strange word. So Rashi tells us, you know what kivala means? When it comes berua. L'toich, Rashi tells us, l'toich nartik shaloi. When you pack it up, the kodesh, the holy parts of the Mishkan, they're not at a glance, they're not at a look at it when you put it in its nartik, in its case. And therefore Rashi understands the word bara is like something berua. Something berua means if you have something that's absorbed, something gets poured, a hot item gets poured into something else, it comes berua. They're not allowed, even though Kahas is commanded to carry the Mishkan, they're not allowed to look at it. Now, we have another pshat, what the word Kabbalah. The Netziv says a different pshat. The Netziv says, the Berach Moshe doesn't say this, but I want to tell you, the Netziv tells us, you know what Kabbalah means? Kabbalah, I'm going to quote the Netziv in the Hamek Davar, He says, you not even look at it, keheref ayin, even just a glimpse of your eye. Just like, you know what berua means? When a person swallows something, it's called baleya. If a person swallows food whole, he says, without chewing, he doesn't get anything from the food. The enjoyment you get from the food is when you chew it, and then you enjoy the food, then you swallow it. If you swallow it whole, you don't get enjoyment. So too, if a person sees something at a glimpse for a second, corner of his eye, he's considered a baleya, because after he didn't get a full picture of it. So therefore, the Torah is commanding, the Netziv says, they can't even take a glimpse, even a little glimpse, a blink of an eye. You can't even look at the Kodesh. Why not? So the Berach Moshe says that the Pasuk is teaching us that Kahas is commanded to be people who understand what Kodesh is, what holy is. You don't have to look at it. You feel it in your bones. You feel it, it's part and parcel of you. Not only, as Rashi tells us, to look at it when it's being put away, the cause had to wait till it was put away and only then they can carry it. But as the Netziv says, they can't even glimpse at it. They not even take a Raya Vein Masbiya, even Keheref Ayin. So when we talk about Emunah, it's not as we sometimes say, yeah, I'm a believer. It has to be 1,000%. If you glimpse, if you have even an iota where you have to look, you have to see, you have to check that you're Maimin, it's no good. It's even, if you look at it at a glimpse, no, you're not allowed to. And therefore the Torah begins this week's parsha. It's not just Kahas. Naso es roish b'nei Gershon gam heim. They also can't look at the Kodesh. They also don't have to look with their eyes to really check if it's holy. They don't have to look. It's Shema Yisrael. We believe in it. And therefore, when it comes to the beginning of the Pasuk, the beginning of this week's Parsha, it's Lebeis Avoisam Lemishpachaisam. It's first comes the Father's house. The Father, we get the Amunah because we're Maminim, B'nei Maminim. We're children of people who believed. We're grandchildren of people who believed. We're great-grandchildren. And therefore, the expression that's used before Mishpachaisam, before their families, is Beis Avoisam, the house of their fathers. So first comes the house of the fathers, then comes Mishpachaisam to teach us that the Amunah stems from our family. It's within our blood. It's within our DNA. We don't have to look. Even a glimpse is wrong. And as the doctor asked the Chafetz Chaim, how do you know there's a God in this world? And the Chafetz Chaim answered so correctly, show me that you're a good doctor today. What, I have something from 30 years ago. Yes, we have from hundreds of years ago. We have a Torah Akdosha which teaches us Emunah. And despite every challenge that we have, and especially during this period of time, we overcome the challenges. We say, Ribono Shel Olam, even though there is a virus in this world, and we can't even walk outside, we're worried and this, and the last week about these protests, not just the protests, the looting, difficult times that we live in, we believe in you at Ribono Shel Olam. And right after Shavuos, the first Shabbos after Shavuos is Tachel Shana B'Chaiseha. The blessings begin. This is the time that we're mechazik our Amunah. This is the time that we review Pirkei Avos, not only between Pesach and Shavuos, but after Shavuos we start again. That once again we begin Pirkei Avos to strengthen our belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you know how we strengthen it to our children? Is if we show that we're believers. If we show that it's part of us. That no matter what challenges HaKadosh Baruch Hu places upon us, we overcome them. We overcome them. And therefore, the language the Berach Moshe says is first is Gam Heim, them too, and Lebeis Avoisam comes first. Beis Avoisam representing the Emunah, the belief that we have from previous generations, that what we call Emunah Pshuta, that's within each and every one of us. I want to end with something on the Haftarah. We're talking about Amunah before I talk about the Haftarah. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, the best way for us to teach children is by example. The best way that a person can teach somebody else is if he sees that we are maminim. That no matter what happens, no matter how difficult times might be, we might be stuck in our houses for weeks and months, and maybe some people never lost people and some people lost their jobs. But if the children and grandchildren see that everything's fine, we're relying upon HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're believers. We understand that Gam Zu L'Toiva. This is all for the good. Before I talk about the Haftarah, I just want to quote one other thing. It's actually a thought from the Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler. Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler, in the Michtav Me'Eliyahu, he says one thought before I talk about the Haftarah, just a few more minutes. He quotes his Rebbe, he says, we know in the beginning of Shmos, it says, Vayelech Moshe, right? Hashem commands Moshe Rabbeinu and tells him that it's time that the Jews are going to leave Mitzrayim. Vayasvos kol ziknei Yisrael, vayamin ha'am, vayiktu vayishtachavu, they believed. They believed. Then it says, the next pasuk, v'achar bo Moshe v'Aaron, Moshe and Aaron came, but Yomer a Paro, they went to Paro and they said, Shalach Hasami, send out my nation. So Rav Dessler asked the question in the name of his Rebbe. He says, I understand. Isn't the greatest Amunah here? Moshe and Aaron are putting themselves in harm's way, in danger. Paro commanded everybody should be thrown into the Nile River. Paro commanded and that we want to kill all the Jews. Here, Moshe and Aaron has the audacity, the chutzpah to come and say, Shalach Hasami, send out my nation. They should have killed. Paro should have killed Moshe on the spot. Not only that, Moshe Rabbeinu was a wanted man. He killed an Egyptian. So it seems like the order should be reversed. It should first say, Moshe and Aaron came in front of Paro, and nothing happened to them. That's the greatest miracle of all the miracles. And then and then the people believed. They saw Moshe and Aaron went into Paro's palace, and nothing happened to them. And they, even though Paro should have killed them on the spot, and then should come the Amunah. So he says a beautiful thought. He says, you know what Amunah brings? Amunah brings Geula. If we're maimin, if we're mamin, if we believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then that brings the ultimate redemption. And therefore, first says, Vayamein ha'am. First it says they're believers, and only then they were worthy of the Geula. Only then they were worthy of the redemption. They come and Moshe Rabbeinu says to Paro, time to get, we're leaving. Shalach esami v'yavduni. So we hope in Mispala that the Amunah that we have, if these difficult times, will bring the Geula. It's time. It's time for the redemption. We're waiting so many years. Ribono Shel Vayelech Moshe vayasvu vayamin ha'am, and then v'achabaya Moshe v'Aaron, they said to Paro, Shalach esami. The Amunah that we have brings the redemption. I want to say one final thought on the Haftarah. We happened to learn this Haftarah a few weeks ago at Sefer Shoftim, where we talk about the birth of Shimshon HaGibar, the Nazir. And it says, Manoach, he says, because I don't have a Navi in front of me, but he sees a Malach Hashem, and the Malach Hashem goes up and he asks Manoach's wife, the Malach comes to Manoach's wife and tells him, you're going to have a child, Shimshon, and then Manoach is not happy. He asks the Malach to come back, and the Malach comes, and then he goes up, the Malach, he makes a korban, he makes a sacrifice, and the Malach goes up to Shamayim, goes up to heaven in the fire, and he promises, before he goes up, he promises that he's going to have a son who's going to be a Nazir, he's going to be a great person. And then the Malach never came back. And then, Az Yada Manoach, then Manoach knew, Ki Malach Hashem Sfakaiso. He knew he was a Malach. So I want to end with this final thought. So Rabbi Eliyahu Baruch Finkel asked a great question. Now he realizes he's a Malach. The Malach came twice, once to his wife, once to him. He goes, jumps into a fire. The fire is consumed up to Shamayim. There's a fire, man, you and I, nobody could jump into a fire. He goes and he gets elevated to the heavens, to Shamayim. And you know why he realizes that he's a Malach Hashem? Because he never came back. Only then. What do you mean only then? He realized before, he saw him jump into the fire. No human being could jump into the fire. Why does he have to wait until he never came back? So Rabbi Eliyahu Baruch Finkel says a beautiful answer. He says most people, we need credit. You do something good for somebody, you want appreciation. You want a thanks. You come back, I did this favor. You come back a week later, a day later, a month later. I did this and this, and you want to pat on your back. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not like that. A Malach Hashem, an angel who's a messenger of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he should come back and say after the child is born, hey, look, I promised you a child. Give me a thanks. A Malach Hashem, he doesn't take thanks. The thanks is to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Az Yada Manoach realized because the Malach never came back, Ki Malach Hashem Tzvakaiso. Because the Malach Hashem doesn't need thanks. He's a messenger of God. You want to give thanks to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Only a human being demands thanks. So we end tonight as a preparation this Thursday evening for parshas Naso. Mispal HaKadosh Baruch Hu that all the tragedies and all the difficulties and all the challenges that we had to overcome should end. Tachel, Shana, Ubilchaiseha. And whatever, maybe we did some good to some other people. Maybe we helped some people during these last 2 months. We don't have to we don't need thanks. We learn from the Malach Hashem, the thanks all belongs to the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Malach Hashem, he doesn't take thanks for himself. It belongs only directly to God. We thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we're here. Every day is a blessing. Every day is a bracha. And if we're maminim, if we're true believers, then that'll be the first step to the geula, it'll be first step to the final redemption. And only then, as the pasuk says, they believed, and they tell to Paro Shalachas Ami. Now it's time for redemption. We're believers, and only then we deserve geula. So let's strengthen our emunah during these difficult times, challenges after challenges, and we'll show our children, show our families, show our friends what true maminim are. And then, and only then, we'll be worthy of the final redemption where HaKadosh Baruch Hu will gather us all up to Yerushalayim HaKodesh. We won't have to be 2 weeks in solitude and 2 weeks in incubation, but rather we'll go quickly to Yerushalayim and we'll see the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. Is what we daven for 3 times a day. We're maminim b'nei maminim. All the challenges that are around us, strengthen our emunah. Give us another, one more step towards the geula. But if we're true maminim, then we deserve the geula. May we be zeich all of us to see and greet Mashiach Tzidkeinu, B'mheira v'yameinu. Amen. Have a great Shabbos.